Okay, good morning everybody. Welcome, thanks for coming in. I know it's early and I know we're talking about superannuation, so I'll keep it as bright and light and easy as we can. So thanks for coming in again. We've got a bit to get through this morning and I know there'll be plenty of questions. Feel free at any time to fire those off. I'm happy to take questions as we go and work our way through. So this morning I've got David Pryor with me as well. He's our lawyer from Brody Business Lawyers, and he will explain to you and make it simple. Easy? Simple? Simpler than it otherwise is. So when people start talking about super borrowing and limited recourse borrowing arrangements, LRBAs as they're known, complexity is probably the first thing that comes. And just talking to some people this morning, it's sort of everyone says it's so hard, and it is. But we'll explain to you why you'd want to do it and leave the hard stuff to us. That's our job. This morning, limited recourse borrowing arrangements, and specifically in relation to real estate. It can be done with other assets, but we're focused mainly on real estate. First, we'll talk about what these are. What does it mean? If people have heard of limited recourse, banks hate it, don't they? You guys hate limited. You like full recourse. So limited recourse is a very important concept in these loans, as compared to when they don't say it, it's full recourse, which means they can take a whole range of assets and the security charges. So we'll talk about that. Everyone should know what a self-managed super fund is, but there are rules for self-managed funds, self-managed super funds borrowing. We were taught from whippersnappers in taxation, one of the commandments was super funds was thou shalt not borrow. So when they made this change and said super funds can borrow, it was like the earth was no longer flat. This was a major shift in policy. Quite an unintended one, but it was a major shift in policy. I'll give you a little bit of that history of how it came about. Great that they're all there. Well, why would we recommend it? And that's the important point we want to make today. Well, great it's there, but why would you do this? David will take you through the typical borrowing structure, and he'll explain to you how a normal borrowing would work and what the additional moving pieces are in an LRBA arrangement. I'll take you through a case study, which hopefully makes you look at a real life situation and think through the benefits of it. Important points on repairs and improvements. There's a few things about what types of deals this suits. It doesn't suit land and build. There's, like anything, there are ways you can do that or get around that or structure it differently. But repairs and improvements is an important one. Then all the other important information, and then we'll of course disclaim everything we've said today as being general advice. Very wisely, because I have had people go, I came to your seminar, I'm at an auction, what was that name I was meant to put on it? And I'm like, it doesn't work like that, right? So we need to be very mindful of that as well. So the starting point, well, what is it? So a limited recourse borrowing arrangement technically is an investment product. It is not a loan, it is similar to a loan, and it allows an investor to acquire an asset. So the purchaser, you, contribute an initial instalment, commonly known as a deposit. If you're buying a property, typically you pay a 30% deposit, and then your financier would provide the 70%, and you buy the asset. So that's a normal loan. In the case of an LRBA, you put down the initial instalment, and the bank puts down the rest of the money, and then you pay them off in instalments. So each of those instalments are effectively a loan repayment, same sort of thing. The difference with these though, is because you're paying by instalments, these are instalments that you can reverse. So when you make principal repayments off these loans, they are permanent, and they can't be redrawn, okay? So most people understand loans nowadays, and you can have a loan facility or a line of credit or an overdraft or whatever they want to call them. People understand they can redraw them. So if you took out a $700,000 loan on that asset and you paid it down to $200,000, and then you think, oh, I'd like to re-gear that asset or redraw that loan, you cannot. You cannot refinance at a higher amount. You can't do any of those things. And that, to me, is the single biggest difference between one of these and a typical loan, that inability to re-gear. There's a lot of other stuff It's different. In fact, it's not a loan, right? But it's a borrowing arrangement. So, but it all looks much the same. I sort of see it more, when you think about it legally, as almost like a lay-by. So if you went into your local Kmart and bought your bicycle and you're paying it off by instalments, you can't really go back into Kmart and ask for some of those back. Might try that one day, guys. We'll see how we go. The other point to make, I guess everyone gets a bit of fatigue around tax laws and superannuation laws, and they change. When I did my Masters in tax, which was a few years ago now, probably, I don't know, 12, 15 years ago, some poor bugger had done a research paper and counted up that there had been 30,000 changes to superannuation since it came in the 80s. I don't know who does that for a living, right? But seriously, 30,000 changes, something like that. The number just blew my mind, and I wasn't going to check. I wasn't going to audit that count.
There's more coming.
There's a lot, and that was 20 years ago. There's been a lot since. So we all know that super laws change. We all know they're constantly in a change. Tax laws change, governments change, all those things. What you've got to remember is that whenever they put rules in, they very rarely change them retrospectively. And in fact, I don't think there are any examples of retrospective tax or super laws. So there's a lot of people say, oh, they'll change these rules. Well, they might change them, but they don't reverse them. And they can't reverse them retrospectively. So there's a lot of talk about self-managed super funds. What impact is their lending having on the market and property prices? And you know what? I reckon it's hardly measurable, the effect it's had on property prices. But it's a great talking point in the media. So there's a lot of oxygen being wasted, but in reality these rules are pretty well here. To give you some idea, there's over 550,000 self-managed super funds. Their average balance is about $1 million. Most people who have them are in their 40s, so the median age is in their 40s, so they're still growing, accumulating. Funds are being added at around 3,000 funds a month for some time. That's the number of funds growing. And it's now something like more than a third of all super money. And last time I checked, it was probably 12 months ago, only like about 1% or so of funds have done an LRBA.
I think it's now about 3.68%.
Well, we've been very effective, haven't we? It's still not a lot.
It's not
so
a lot.
You look at that in terms of numbers and say, does that affect property markets? No.
No.
And Dave and I will say that of the ones we've done, I've lost track of how many we've done, it'd be in the hundreds, I thought. Mainly, they have been commercial property restructures, which is a case study I'll talk about. These are not people buying a new asset, they're just restructuring the assets they've got. That's very important as well to understand the restructure. The point I make here is that the tax legislation was amended to say you can do this. This is not, I've been in tax law now for 25 years. I've seen when you get the, with all due respect, the solicitor or QC's opinion on a tax interpretation, they're not worth much at all, quite frankly, because for every opinion there's an alternative opinion. This is the law, right? So when the law says you can do this, then it's much clearer, it's in the legislation. So as long as you comply with these things, which you can read at your leisure because you've got the notes, basically that's it. There are some interesting things in there if you're interested in the finer detail. One of the key points is about being a single acquirable asset. And one of the little points you run into when you buy, say, an apartment, often you have a title for the garage and a title for the unit, and they are two separate assets, would you believe? So legally they are two assets. We've dealt with farms where they're on 7 titles. They are 7 different assets. One farm, but 7 assets, 7 titles. Yet strangely, if you try to do these on shares, you can have 100 BHP shares, and that's one asset. But you can sell 1 share, or 2 shares, or...
So your second point, does it have to be acquired through an asset, through a trust?
Yes, short answer.
Must have a custodian trust in place. You can't do it anyway. It's set up in the legislation that way. To do it directly would offend the legislation essentially.
Why do you ask?
But that
No, I'm just wondering whether we...
now that trust only has one duty and obligation, that is to hold the asset for the super fund.
Okay.
So So the underlying beneficiary is the fund. Alright?
Right.
And at all times, basically, the super fund has the control effectively over that trust. It's only there as a bear, what's called a bear trust.
Bear trust, custodian, security trust, they've got a range of names.
But essentially, just to
Same thing.
keep everyone, so we don't confuse it, just call it a bear trust. Meaning it's bear because all it does is hold that asset for the fund.
Okay. And does the bank take the charge over the trust or
Nope.
over
No.
the property?
Over
Property.
Over the property.
And this is that most important point, wasn't it?
Yes.
Because if you've got $1 million in your super fund in cash, and you borrow $1 million from the bank, you can only borrow so much, right? And you buy an asset for 1.5, you sum of the cash, bank, you now got an asset, 1.5, debt of 1 million, and cash of 500. If you don't pay that loan, or the super fund doesn't pay that loan, the bank's security is that asset only. It can't touch the super fund's other assets, which is highly unusual in Australian banking, because they'll take a charge over the entity and children and all this. Sorry, Bill. Once was cruel, twice is just ridiculous. So that's why it's limited recourse. The recourse is limited to the asset. Often there's guarantees from the trustees that sit outside of that basically are okay. In the early days, there were some question marks about whether that was allowed, and then it was clarified with the government that was okay to take those undertakings. So I don't even know they do them as personal guarantees.
Yep.
It's some type of, is it slightly different, the way they do it?
No,
That's the same. So in effect, the same
standard,
thing.
effectively, personal guarantee from the members.
Okay.
Effectively.
So really, you're still not going to walk away from it. They're still going to come after you personally. But the super fund's assets, so if you had 2 of these and defaulted on one but not the other, they can only deal with that one. Okay, not that anyone, we haven't actually seen one of these default
No.
or go pear-shaped. So time will tell.